Hey guys, welcome back to Poker Inferno. Today's student is Jess. Hold on, sorry about this. 1 second. Carrot Corner, Pete speaking.
Yeah, alright, mate. Yeah, I bought Carrot Poker School, mate, yeah? And, I had a losing month. So what's that about, yeah?
You got Carrot Poker School? All of it? Like the full scholarship? Grades 1, 2, 3, and E?
Yeah, mate, full thing, mate, innit?
Right, okay. And you've had a losing month this month, so you're not happy.
Yeah, mate.
Okay, so how much of the Carrot Poker School have you watched so far?
I watched grade 1 lecture 1, mate, when I was watching the boxing, yeah? Then I watched grade 1 lecture 2 in the car, mate, when I was driving, yeah?
Right, okay, so you've just watched 2 of the 43 videos. You've not done any of the exams yet or anything like that. Okay, and how many hands did you play this month?
3011, mate.
3011 hands, 3011.
Yeah, mate, innit?
Right, okay. So I would just say be patient, you know, take your time. You've barely worked through any of the course yet. It sounds like you've been a bit distracted when working through it. Like, I definitely recommend sitting down with a notepad, almost like you're in a university lecture or something, like taking it really seriously. And like, you've not played that much volume, you know? 3011 hands, it can feel like a lot of the time, but it's really not a big...
Yeah, mate, you said it would transform my game, mate, yeah? You scammer, mate. You're a scammer, mate, innit? You're a scammer.
Sorry about that, guys. Today's video is Poker Inferno, and it's episode 10, and we have Jess in the hot seat, who you may remember from being on the Stalling to Mauling series on this channel a while back. We're going to be reviewing our game today, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to the video. All right, ladies and gents, we are back with Poker Inferno episode number 10, and in the hot seat today it is a girl you may remember from such coaching shows as Coaching Journeys Season 2 from Stalling to Mauling. It's Jess. Jess is back. How's it going, Jess? How are you today?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. It's all good. Yeah, Monday morning. So how good can it possibly be? But other than that,
Yeah, and it's been probably a year or so since I think you did a stream with us like randomly at some point, but it's been a while since you were back on YouTube on Carrot Corner as such. So what have you been up to? Have you been playing a lot of poker? How's life? What's new?
yeah, life is good. I've been playing a lot of poker again recently. I think all in, I've been playing reg tables normally now as well. I've started to go back to a bit of Zoom, just because I'm on stars and the pool's like not that bad. So I've started to go back to a bit of Zoom, but I've been playing a lot of reg tables. My volume for the year is quite rubbish. I also had like a little phase of about maybe a month or two of playing tournaments online, which was pretty good, but work-life balance and like fitting MTT playing alongside work just wasn't really working for me. So switched back to cash games, so I can kind of just jump in for an hour or two.
Yeah. You went to the dark side, you've come back to the light. Okay, awesome. Let's jump into the pool and let's play Poker Inferno.
Let's go.
What are your thoughts?
I feel like this is good for our range. It's also kind of good for his, I suppose, because he opened, what's that, under the gun? Yeah.
Okay, so we 3-bet nines against EP, and it goes cold call, call. So your main thoughts in hand here were to do with like, this is a good board for our range, we bet at higher frequencies on boards that are good for our range, etc. Now let's look at the sizing that you used here.
Yeah.
So I would say the first point here coaching point is that when you have a cold caller in the hand, well, what sort of range do you expect them to have for the most part? What sort of hands?
Like pocket pairs. Um, anything from like kind of up to about pockets, nines, tens, even actually even jacks sometimes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see queens and ace king in there at some frequency if you suited broadways as well, stuff like that. So what that's going to do is it's going to mean that you have to be a bit more strict with your investment criteria, right? So you can range bet a board like this, heads up. You can bet like any hand, and there's an argument. Whatever hand you have, there's enough of an argument going on that you can bet it. So if you do bet nines here, it's probably the most depolar hand in your range, right? It's like the mergiest hand in your range, but heads up, you can probably still bet that because you get called by maybe the odd worst combo and you clean up a lot of equity and you go from there. But if any hand is a check heads up, it's nines, right? If you're playing range bet, then you won't be checking nines. But when you go three way, I would start to see it as the most hopeless, perhaps, and also the most depolarized hands in my range can be checked now because I'm not playing a range bet strategy in a three way pot with a cold collar in the pot. I think they've just got too many hands that are continuing. I don't think the fold equity justifies it anymore. I don't think it's needed anymore. I don't think it's the best way to go. So
Okay.
the first hands that I would be turning into checks would be stuff like nines, no heart, tens, jacks. The thing is, when you bet nines here and then you just start checking, all that really happens here is that you lose an extra bet against like a king that someone's hit or tens or jacks or something. It's very rare that this takes it down. And if it does take it down, yes, it's useful. You're cleaning up equity, but you're probably winning on a bunch of runouts anyway by checking down or betting later or something in that case. So I would just say if something happens that makes you think you're not betting your range, just ask where the absolute middle is because these are going to be the first hands to check. And like nines, tens with no heart are probably the absolute middle in this case.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think multi-way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good pointer to remember for sure.
Yeah, so range advantage is like it can be a guiding factor to how often we're betting, but it's not going to like necessarily mean our hand is a bet, especially if we have that cold collar in the pot here.
Yeah. So like nines with a heart there, it's because we're blocking like some of the flush draws, like suited big cards that they could have maybe called with free, is it?
I'd still check, to be honest. I just think it's a higher equity hand, so it can win a.
Oh, right,
Its
yeah.
set outs are better. So when you have nines with a heart, the nine of hearts isn't one of your outs, right? So there's no nine that brings a flush on the turn when the nine of hearts is in your hand. You're only drawing
Okay.
to the nine of clubs, diamonds, or spades, like two of those. So that's one reason why building the pot's maybe a bit more defensible. But overall, here, I think I'd rather just not put much, if any, money in at all until I know what's happening. So, like, yes,
Okay.
you check, and sometimes one guy has ace jack, another has queen 10 suited, and like you make them both fold, and it's happy days. But a lot of the time, you check the flop here, and then someone leads for pot, and you're like so glad you didn't waste the c bet, or they check to you again, and then you've got a better idea that you actually do have the best hand more often, or whatever, right? So I think like by either betting smaller than this, like if you made me see bet here, I'd actually bet like seventh pot or sixth pot or something. I would size it down even more, or I would check and I just want to find out what's going on here rather than just putting out a bet that doesn't really do anything when you're about to get information for free on what people's ranges actually are here. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of this is transparency based as well.
Okay. Great.
Cool. Let's sit back in. I think you're famous for your beluga tag from previous content. Okay, give us your thoughts as this progresses.
I thought the free bet was from the small blind, and then this guy calling in the big blind. Like he is going to hit, I think, quite a bit of this board with pocket pairs. Um, oh, I'm just going to check back, so it's multi-way. We think the turn. Nice. I feel like I feel like I want to raise this because he does have a lot of like, he has tens as well, but he has fives and sevens that he maybe, but I've no idea of raise size. Like just click it back. Or just call, maybe get this guy to come along. I have no idea. I want to maybe get a heads up. This might be terrible. Hopefully we just get it in here against fives or sevens. Not tens. Okay. Oh, of course.
All right, interesting one. Okay, so this video may as well just be called How to Play Nines in a Cold Called 3-Bet Pot, since that's all we've had so far. Very weird. So we go 3-way here, and yeah, cold caller, we described what that range looks like in the prior nines hand already. Maybe you've taken some of that coaching from hand one to the flop here, but I love the check. I think just getting some transparency of what's going on. Like you're never going to have a huge EV hand here. Like I'd bet for, thin value protection heads up here sometimes. Like if it was just small blind and button and small blind checks, I'd do a fair bit of stabbing with nines. You can check or bet, it doesn't really matter. But I think here with the cold caller in, your hand's just worse than normal. There's more jacks and stuff than normal against you here. Just check, see what develops, see what kind of turn you get, and see if you want to maybe make a protection bet when it checks to you a second time, or a thin value protection small bet when it checks to you. But we do hit the 9 as played, and it goes check and lead. So yeah, what do you think about this range? What adjectives could you use to describe this leading range here?
Adjectives would be probably pocket pairs, maybe like over pairs.
These are nouns, Jess.
Possibly.
Come on. What are we playing at here? These are nouns. I said
Oh,
adjectives.
God. I don't. I'm testing me on my English grammar.
Right.
An adjective.
Describing where I mean, you can use nouns, right? Pocket pairs are good, right? Pairs are good. You can say that. Over pairs, sure. Some of them, not the bigger ones. I'm guessing, like, I guess by adjectives I mean, like, is it merged? Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it polarized? Like, how would you describe it?
I feel like this is strong because of this guy's stats. He is tagged at a nit. I only just tagged him, but it was like 50 odd hands, and he's like 9-7. So I'm pretty, I'm pretty convinced that he is in it. So yeah, here definitely kind of strong.
Yeah. And even if you didn't have the 9-7, like I think it's really good to not be fully reliant on HUD and to have population reads as well. So even if this is an unknown, anyone who cold calls a 3-bet and leads big on this texture is gonna have a strong mergy, under bluffy, equity driven sort of range, right? So I guess by adjectives, I'm just encouraging you to not have to think on the hand level where you're just exhaustively listing everything, but thinking in the general descriptive level. Because if you do decide the range is equity driven, strong, mergy, not really bluffing very much with low equity hands, I think that means you can just fast play a lot of your hands, right? Now you do have a guy in a small blind here, but like how often is small blind really checking over pair plus at these stakes on the turn here after flop checks through? I think it's like almost never. So I'm not really bothered. He's kind of a lost cause as far as I'm concerned. Like calling to get that guy to continue feels like blood from a stone at this point, and I'm not so worried about that. So I'm mainly going to focus my EV on how to maximize against strong range. And when you have a wet, dry kind of board, and you think the villain's range is really strong, and you have the pseudo nuts, yeah, absolutely, you can just fast play. So I don't think there's anything really wrong with your raise here at all. One thing that's debatable is, like, is it better to jam? But I don't know. It's not clear to me that it's better to jam. I do think jam should be on the table though as an option. It feels like it's all right when you raise here. You're not really making it that huge by jamming. It's like pot size or something. Like not a huge raise by any means. So jam's definitely viable here. I think there's a lot of 10x plus diamond that's gonna snap it off. Jacks might snap it off if he folds eights. That's not a bad thing given all the equity that eights has. If he has something like that. So and of course you make sure that you stack a set, although I think you're going to stack a set kind of regardless at this SBR if you just go small. So yeah, I quite like fast playing here. If I thought the player behind could actually have something, like if I thought they could protect their range, I might call and try and get greedy and get that bet out of them. But I just think it's good to ask yourself, how often are we really getting money from the small blind here? Because that to me is the thing that decides whether I want to fast play or slow play. Because I don't think big blind's really bluffing low equity stuff or is going to bluff the river very often. So I'm just inclined to play my hand normally and fast play it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. Really unfortunate showdown. Running into tens. It is the most likely set, but there's other stuff in this range. Obviously, we're not able to avoid this one.
Yeah.
Any questions on that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
feel like it's a pretty standard hand.
Okay. So let's play
Right.
some more pocket nines in cold call 3-bit pots. Then let's just keep doing that for the rest of the session.
Yeah. Calling the big blind. It's fine, I'd imagine. This is a tough one. Sometimes I might check raise this because I feel like we've got like way more twos than he does. But it's whether he believes us.
Right, let's talk about that. So my biggest like concern so far is that you seem to be using like range versus range analysis as like a sufficient reason for stuff or nearly a sufficient reason for stuff. It's
Okay.
true that you have more deuces than he does. In Equilibrium, though, there's still going to be some standards about what you need to bluff raise with, like what kind of hands would be your bluff raises. And I don't think this one's ridiculous. And I think with like the Ace of Spades, it would be like totally normal. Other hands that would be really normal would be like the Queen Jack of Diamonds and stuff like that, the Jack Nine of Diamonds, hands like this. I think Ace
Mhm.
3 isn't too unreasonable, but the main factor I'd go to here isn't like, can I have the nuts and can villain have the nuts? Like, sure, that's true, but I'd be thinking about how the raise actually performs. So when people are betting here, what are they betting? They're usually betting range. How are they
Yeah.
reacting to check raise? I think data's going to say they're overfolding a bit. They're not reacting that well. But when they're early position, they're going to be defending closer to equilibrium than in late position. So they're going to be doing a better job of defending when they're hijack because their range is just snugger and easier to play than they are when they're in late position. So I actually think that this is fine to just fold here. And if you had a spade, like the Ace of Spades, it would be a pretty clear check raise. And if you were playing this hand against like button or something as an exploit, I think you could just go with the check raise anyway, even if it's not quite the right hand in theory. Not because you have more deuce X than the opponent, but because you think it's an overfolded spot. So we need a bit
Okay.
less range thinking and a bit more trying to decide like what's the EVA of this? Is this the best play? Is it, if you're bluffing, is it overfolded, underfolded? If you're considering value betting, then how good is your hand and what sizing does it want to use? That sort of thing, right? Just getting to the point about how to play your hand a bit more
Right.
and thinking exploitatively about what the fold equity is like if we're bluffing, for example.
Okay. Cool.
But I like the fold. All right, let's go to next one. Let's jump in. Thoughts, Jess?
I'm not sure it's good. I'm not sure it's good for us to see about that board. Because they have quite a lot of it, I feel like, when they're calling from the big blind. And then in this spot, probably with the lead out, we do have a king. We have like the overpair, and we've also got a gut shot. So and then just fold river.
What sizing do you play on a board like this normally?
Probably big. I
Okay.
reckon.
Okay. I would say that when it's a low board, big and polar is an okay way to go. When it's getting low and very, very connected, in the sense that they can have a lot of two pairs, straights, etc., sets, I might go back to using a third again. So if you imagine like on a high board, we usually go a third. We can build the big one on a lower, drier board, and then on the really wet board, we might just go back to a third again because they're a bit more nutted again.
Yeah.
So keep the big sizing more for the flops where your overpairs are wanting to play big pots really often. So if you can imagine a lot of runouts where your overpairs want to play big pots, good spot to build the B75 strategy. Whereas if your overpairs are very often going to want to check later or play smaller pots, like here, you can just play small bets when you're betting. Okay.
Okay.
As for King 5, yeah, I think it's probably a check, but you know, you'd be surprised. There are some hands, if this board was a bit drier, like it was 10-6-4, you'd definitely be betting king 5 high frequency. Maybe when it gets super soaking wet, like king 6-7, this becomes more of a check, but, you know, don't dismiss that semi-hopeless bluff region on drier boards. It's important if you're playing a big c-bet on 10-6 deuce or something that you are betting king 5, like, pretty often.
Okay.
Just to make sense of, just so you understand the spot, right? You're not just building equity driven, you're building some bad hands that are bluffing too there. On the turn, certainly a continue. I think you should consider raising as well, because you can check back here with a bunch of decent 10x. You can check an overpair on this board very happily. You do not have to bet all your overpairs on 10-6-7. So you're going to have a value region here, and you're going to want to find some bluffs. And not all of those bluffs are just going to be flush draws. Some of them are going to be like gutters with an over and stuff like that. So I'm also inclined to think at these stakes that when they go third pot on turn, they're not protected. That it's not just a default sizing, but actually it's more bet size equals hand strength. So my favorite line here against 1/3 probe at 10 NL is to raise turn here as a bluff.
Okay.
But I think it's just not on your radar. You're locked into thinking about, do I have enough to continue? And you got to the right answer, which is yes. And if you're choosing between call and fold here, it's definitely a call. But I think raise outperforms both pretty clearly here when you think about what their range is like for third pot. So let's get bluffing more on your radar in spots where their range is kind of probably capped and stuff like that.
Okay.
River, we face just over half. I'm not saying I would raise here, but again, raise would cross my mind, right? So just building the awareness that you do have flushes, you do have straights, you do have a bunch of 9x that just hit something, you do have a bunch of flushes that just hit something. And again, you're seeing like a relatively small probe, like a relatively small sizing here from villain. So raise is probably okay, honestly.
Okay.
But it's just not really on your radar, I think, is the issue at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, this card is amazing for our calling range on the turn for sure. Yeah, I don't think raising the flop, I mean, raising the turn, I don't think I would really ever think about that, to be honest. That's a good point.
But it makes sense, right? You have value hands that play that way. So it's not like you're repping nothing or taking a silly line. Like, you can have good 10x plus there. And you can even have some turn sets, 2-pair and straights. Okay, maybe not 2-pair, but you can have most of that. Then on river, you just have so many nutted hands that in theory, if you're not raising a hand that contains like a diamond and doesn't have showdown value, then probably you're under bluffing the river. And that might be right, or it might not be, but the default should be that there are bluffs for you in spots like this. And then you can ask, do I want to refrain from those exploitatively? But the default should be to consider them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to get more bluffing, fold equity hunger on the radar here when you're in game.
Okay.
Cool.
I start betting there with the gut shot, yeah, just because they've shown kind of weakness on the flop.
Okay, so one thing I would consider, and I might not do it again, is like, do I want to donk about the flop? Because you are a big blind player on 6-4-7. It's a very good board for your range, whereby the preflop raiser will be checking a lot if you check, and you have just made a lot of nutted stuff. And there's also a fish in the small blind here, against whom the pot's going to stagnate if we check like very often. So I would have a leading range here. This is a spot that would be one of the first ones on my radar to start adding donk bets to your game. So if it's not something you currently do, this is kind of like the first port of call for adding donk bets. Would be a spot where it's checking through a lot. If you check, you've got fish out of position to you in a reg in position. This is just like donk bet 101 sort of situation. I think with Jack 8, it's not that great because I'd rather just see what happens. I think regs see bet 2 equity driven here. They'll tell you when they have a good hand. The weaker player will tell you what they have on the turn. So I quite like checking this low equity hand, but I'm quite a fan of leading for value and with higher equity stuff in this spot.
Okay. What kind of size do we lead with there? That is definitely something I don't do a lot of.
Just third is fine. You're just like making
Yeah.
sure that stagnation doesn't happen, and you're still
Okay.
going to be leading a range that contains a lot of medium stuff as well, like a lot of like pocket eights, pocket nines, stuff like this. 7-8 can be leading for value denials. So when you're building a range that's thin, value betting quite often isn't always just betting with the nuts. Like using the small sizing is probably the right go-to size for these spots.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially because you're leading into two uncapped ranges as well, you know? So going big into two ranges that are uncapped doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah.
Okay. On the king turn, what kind of card is this for the hijacks range?
For the hijacks range, I think he does hit it sometimes. He has like random king X hands in his hands,
So
but
what
it's obviously much wider than that.
when he doesn't have a king, what does he usually have?
When he doesn't have a king,
Mhm.
like air,
Mhm.
like just two overs probably.
Right. So he hardly ever has like nines or tens or jacks or queens or something, right?
No, I wouldn't thought so
Right.
after the flop.
Good. And small blind, usually like small blind can have a more mergy range than that, but is also going to have like a king sometimes and a lot of air as well. So
Yeah.
what do you think I'm going to say about your sizing, given that hijack's range is either like a king they've just hit or something really bad?
Maybe too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're bluffing into a range that's either just hit something that's semi-nutted or just has ace jack high, you don't need to go 75% pot. So you're leading out 75% pot on a card that really polarizes the main opponent that we're worried about here.
Right.
The more
Okay.
polar they are, the smaller you want to go. So I'm a fan of leading this hand. I don't really mind it, but if you do it for 1/3, it's going to be plus EV, and if you do it for this sizing, it's probably worse than checking now.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so it's just about, yes, if you had a big hand, maybe you would lead big here. Maybe if you had a set, you would want to, I'd probably just check raise to be honest, but maybe you would want to like lead giant. But in practice, what's the best sizing with your bluff? Because the best sizing with your air hand isn't necessarily going to be the best sizing for a value hand in a very exploitative spot like this, like three-way.
Okay.
So again, we're just asking what's best for my hand. You've got the general pattern of like when people check, they're not protected. You can do a lot of bluffing, but pay attention for cards that uncap the primary opponent and look for spots where the primary opponent's more polar and size down, especially with your bluffs exploitatively in those spots.
Okay. I feel like that's not. I don't like this size, but now that we've hit top pair, I don't think I can go anywhere. If he bets big again, I think I have to fold. Yeah.
Cool. Let's give it a look. All right, so 10-7 of diamonds. There may be some hands that are so bad that you can fold even to the sizing. Like this is probably one of them. Like I don't mind just folding pre here because there's quite a lot of reverse implied odds with a hand like this. And yes, villain sizing is ridiculous and it's pitiful, and you know, villain's clearly not a good poker player, but their range is probably quite strong in linear, even though they've gone small. And we have 10-7 suited at stack depth where we're not being fully rewarded for trips and 2 pair plus. So I think I would like let this go and probably call like 10-9, maybe 10-8,
Okay.
stuff like that. You can still have a folding range here, basically, right? If you have like ace 8 off, you're folding. If you have 10-7 suited, you're folding. Then you're calling anything like more playable than those, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Flop, I think you played it well. I think you just have to call here and see what transpires. I'm not a fan of raise, get it in at all.
No.
And as you said here, if villain makes another big bet, I guess the idea is they're probably just not bluffing enough on this texture. They probably weren't light enough pre-flop. All of this stuff,
Yeah.
we have a sort of bluff catcher here. In theory, this is going to be very, very close, right? Like the hand is going to be like close to indifferent. I think in practice, fold is the right thing to do. So I think you played this really well post-flop, but it's just a small adjustment pre is to fold the bottom of the stuff in playability terms, even against a smaller sizing, but then continue most hands.
Okay. Yeah. I do feel like my call in, I need to check for stats on this, like for the history, but I feel like my call in on the calling in that spot there is maybe too wide if that's because that felt kind of like
Yeah.
not a no-brainer, but I wouldn't have put too much thought into calling there.
Right.
But yeah, so I maybe need to check that out.
I
Calling a bit
think you're
light.
making a few pre-flop investments that are dicey, like a few of your multi-way completes in the big blind. Like it's hard to see this, but your hand performs so badly. Like see when you have Jack 8 off and it goes min raise call, and I don't mind a call because small blind's a whale or something like that. Like if small blind's a fish, it's okay. But like in equilibrium, those hands are losing because even though you're getting like 6-1, the hand is just entitled to like almost none of the pot. Like it's just terrible. So look out for those spots too, where like even though you're getting decent pot odds pre, you're just still folding. Like there are spots like that.
Okay.
It's not been egregious, you know. I'm not seeing anything terrible. I'm just pointing out the trend.
Tasty Marlborough. Marlboroughs aren't tasty. Who are you lying into? I have to size up a bit on this board. I'm tempted, but what's this big bind? I feel like he called. Yeah, I feel like he calls with like less than what hits that board.
Okay. So Jess, I want your flop sizing scheme to be a function of how capped / nutty the opponent is for now, primarily. So if you think the opponent can be pretty nutted, I want you using small bets on the flop, and if you think they're pretty capped and you're just really nutted, then I want you using big bets on the flop. Ace, king, queen, because it's triple Broadway, is more into the domain that they can just have the nuts, right? They can just have all the combos of Jack 10. They can have some two pair. It's not a classic board where they're really capped. So I would just say, as a general rule, simplify for now. Small bets if you think they can have loads of nutted stuff, and big bets when it's like a low disconnected board where they really can't. How does that sound as like a sizing scheme?
Okay, yeah.
Yep. If you have a board like
go
ahead.
Sorry, I do feel like I'm doing the opposite of that at the moment. I feel like I've been betting bigger on there because kind of if our range kind of hits it hard, I think we want to build a pot.
So. Yeah, but it's not just about your range, it's about their range as well. So like if like a board like 8-5 deuce rainbow, you don't hit it hard in the sense that you hit like pairs with unpaired hole cards, like you hit a pair of eights, but you hit it hard in the sense that your over pairs are really, really strong and they're unique to you. So it's you that has all the big hands and not villain. On a board like this, while you do hit it hard and you have Jack 10, they also have all of the Jack 10. So classically, you'd go smaller. I don't think it's terrible to go a bit bigger here. I'm just trying to give you a really hard and fast accessible rule that will have you making sense of your c-bet game. So if they're uncapped and have loads of nuts, go small. And if they're capped and don't have much nuts at all, go big. So even if this board is king, queen, 4, two-tone, I don't mind you going big because they really don't have that many nutted combos on king, queen, 4. Right? Okay. Yeah. So we bet flop small, which I think is good. Villain calls, and we get the 5 turn. I am all for this barrel. I think they're going to raise too much of their good stuff off on the flop. I think this is overfolded now. I think they have a lot of king X, queen X, ace X, and I think this is one of those spots where if you bet turn and river, it's still overfolded. So I think turn is overfolded, and if they continue turn, I think river is still overfolded. I think they just have way too much one pair, and they're not going to defend enough of it. So 3s is an optional bluff in GTO. It's a hand you're allowed to bluff with. You choose to just always bluff it because fold equity is better than it should be. So I want to see from you more is this like, what's my fold equity like here? Like I know this is a GTO permissible bluff. You know, it's, as Carrot Poker School says, it's an optional bluff, right? On turn.
Yeah.
What's my fold equity like? And do I want to turn that into something prohibited if I don't like my fold equity? Or do I want to turn that into something mandatory if I do like my fold equity? Now I'm going to give you a bit of critique. I did not like the way you reacted to villain folding here because you said yes or yeah in a way that like validated that your play was correct. And I think that's really unhealthy and I want to break that feedback. I can tell you're doing it. Yeah. And you've kind of always done that. And I want you to really try not to because it's super bad for you.
Like I'm winning little fights.
You're winning little fights, but you're also, because you're doubting your thought process and you're a bit insecure about whether you're doing the right thing, you're looking desperately for validation from somewhere and you're taking it from the result of the hand because you really want it. That's what's going on there mental game wise. And you need to be more okay with not knowing whether it's right. You need to make that play and then be like, well, I'm sat here with a coach who's about to tell me, or if you're not sat here with me, I'm going to like look this up. I'm going to think about it more out of game. I'm going to get to the bottom of it rather than please give me validation now or tell me if I did something right or wrong. You're looking for too much feedback too soon. Just be chill with not knowing yet whether it was right. It's okay.
Yeah, like 100%. I agree with that because it's in the spots where I have to fold. I feel like that affects me more than in these little spots where I'm winning.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the spots where I have to make a fold, like I know that in poker we have to fold, and that's like a good thing to do. But at the time, I just can't like. Then it can't be validated at all because you don't see what they have.
Yep.
And it's really hard for me to deal with then.
Yeah. So if your validation from calling, betting, bluffing, value betting comes from the showdown and or the villain folding, and then when you fold, you know you're getting no further information, it makes sense why you feel then a real resistance to that. It's like one mental game leak causes another because you're desperate for the validation right away and the feedback right away. If you're folding, you know you're not getting that, and therefore you know you're about to be in a worse mental state, and then you don't want to fold, and it'll even cause you to be a station, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing what I can pick up on when I know the student from past experience, and I just hear that one little ounce of validation being taken from the fact the villain folded. I'm like, that's my main coaching point for this hand now. Never mind the fact you made a really good turn bet. You don't get credit for that. We're going to tear you apart for the little subtle when villain folded instead. All right, let's jump back in. Soiled fool.
And he's donkey brained as well. Multi-way now. I can't remember at all what we said about sizings. It's gone. What's he doing? I feel like I'm gonna barrel, even though it's multi-way, because they are gonna call with kind of like 7s, 8s, flush draws, other little random bits. I still think top pair's not bad here. It's multi-way is not making me very happy with this, but like I do think I can still bet it. This guy's got some frees though, to be fair. I don't think he's got many. And then just check back river. With showdown, I mean. Oh, my days.
Good old quads. All right, let's talk about that one. Yeah, sometimes when we're in game, everything we know just doesn't exist and we can't think, especially if we've just been told something for the first time or the first time in a while. So just to recap the flop idea, if you think your opponents are quite uncapped, like they can have an ace, like top pair aces a lot, or they can have two pair plus a lot, or they can have trips a lot because it's a relevantly paired board, we're going to go small. And if we think they're way more capped, we're going to go bigger. Multi-way though, we're going to be on the smaller side, right? Usually.
Okay.
So this is definitely a small bet sort of situation. Three-way. If the board was like 8-5 deuce rainbow, like again, one of these really, really dry, harmless ones, we can use half pot or something. We can go a bit bigger, even multi-way. But here I'm definitely one high card, just going to go for small. We get called in two spots. On the turn, you seem to be doing the right thing. You're rating your hand's equity and deciding whether it's good enough to value bet. And it feels like it is. However, you then started to doubt whether you liked it because it was three-way and you started to get worried that it might be a bit thin, right?
Yeah.
So what can you do then if you think that you can pretty much almost value bet, but it's maybe a bit too thin when you do this? Like, what could you have done here?
Size down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you consider just dialing this down to like B60 or something?
Probably not. I feel, yeah, I don't know. I don't think like I did.
Mhm.
It definitely wouldn't have ever been 1/3. I might have like, yeah, sometimes I might have dialed this down a little bit, I suppose, but not just then.
Yeah, like Another way to think about it is Jack 10 isn't craving like a massive pot by the end of the hand. It's never really like trying to force loads of money in by river. So
Yeah.
smaller is probably better. Could you just check? Like, yeah, you probably could just check as well. But if I was going to bet, I think I would just go for something like half pot. And I don't really care that it's not my default spot for the situation. It's a multi-way pot. Like, you can make it up as you go. You know, you can just make it up as you go along. So I think if you're in that territory where you want to value bet, you're worried it's thin, and you find yourself making a big bet, like just make the bet smaller, and that's probably going to relieve the issue.
Mm-hmm.
On river, definitely a check back by that point. I think values run out against anyone but huge station, and we run into the quad threes from the soiled full. So what can you do? If you're going to be a donkey brain soiled full, it's good to flop quads.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was fun. Apart from getting stacked right at the start, hopefully a few relevant takeaways. What sort of stuff are you going to take away from this coaching session, do you think, Jess?
Just bringing more into my game that I don't use anymore. I feel like the stuff on like Donkin boards. That time I recorded in the big blind, I think with Jack 8 off. Donkin is there, something that I would just never really do. It's not something I've ever really studied or built anything on.
Yeah, and I don't want you donking like loads of situations. I
Yeah.
just want you to learn like maybe the bread and butter, like big blind on really low connected board type ones first, and then we go from there.
Yeah. And then I think the one about check raising as well. I can't remember specifics, but I'll definitely watch the video after and make some notes on it. I feel like I don't check raise enough.
Yeah, so trying to think about fold equity. So yeah, maybe you don't check raise enough, and just thinking about like, okay, what kind of hands can I use in theory? And then what's my fold equity like in practice? Is this a spot where it's going to perform well, and just really getting to the EV of bluffing? Like, put the bluff on the table and then assess the fold equity with it, rather than using like vague notions like, oh, I have more of a nut advantage here, or I can hit trips and they can't. Like, yeah, maybe, but that doesn't mean the hand in front of you is good or bad to raise. You still need to do an analysis of like what kind of hand it is it the right kind of hand, and then like what's the fold equity like exploitatively, and go from there.
Yeah, definitely. And then just kind of same old, just like little mental game things, just to try and concentrate on it a bit more, because obviously that time, let out a little yes or whatever, like that's just a natural thing for me. Still need to really work on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I don't want to seem like I'm some policeman of emotions or something. It's just about having the right kind of reactions. So training the brain to, when you do say yep, and you catch yourself doing that, because you're still going to do it, that you then say, okay, hold on a minute, that one iteration doesn't say anything about what my fold equity is overall. They just folded this time. And then just saying, right, I'm going to look at that later. And it's not that you can't take validation from playing well. You can, but you want to do it after you verified that your play is good, and not just like in the moment when you get the result that you wanted. So it's about looking for a different kind of validation. But yeah, don't be hard on yourself if you do find yourself doing that, because it's a very ingrained habit, and it's going to take a lot of time to undo that sort of habit. So yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm getting better at dealing with the results of a hand, like the quad threes, like the set of a set at the start. Like I don't really care now about kind of losing stacks there. I think about how I've played the hand and whether I've been happy with it. And like the quad threes, when I know when I check back the river there, I know I'm going to be beat sometimes.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't bother me anymore because I'm happy with just how I played the hand.
Yeah, I do sense a lot more calm from you now, and a lot more like objectivity than what I saw like back at the start. Like I don't know if we'd even have been able to do a live sweat back then without it just being completely fueled with like the desperate need to win and the desperate need to avoid losing. You used to be extremely results oriented and extremely swayed by how a session was going. And I'm not saying that's going to go away totally, but yeah, you do feel a bit more I don't know, ambivalent to it now than you used to be, which is great. It's going to open the door to you being able to learn. All right, Jess, thank you so much for coming on Poker Inferno. And yeah, we'll catch up with you again in the future. And I hope this has been useful.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right, guys, don't forget the Golden Carrot is out at Carrot Corner if you're going to get our products for the first time. That is our brand new bundle. Check out Carrot Corner along with new course Weapons of War. And we'll see you back here for another episode of Poker Inferno or some other content soon. Bye for now, guys.